Beatrice Sullivan's white heels pounded against marble as she sprinted through the country club's east wing, her cathedral-length veil streaming behind her like a flag of surrender. The guests were assembled in the grand ballroom, champagne flutes raised, string quartet playing softly, completely unaware that the bride had just locked herself in the powder room for 20 minutes, staring at her reflection while her entire future collapsed around her like a house of cards. She had finally admitted what she'd been ignoring for months. She didn't love Marcus. Worse, she suspected he didn't really love her either. They were convenient for each other, fitting into the neat boxes their families had drawn, but convenience wasn't worth spending the next 50 years pretending her dress, all $15,000 of French lace and silk, caught on a door handle as she turned a corner. She heard the fabric tear but didn't stop. Behind her, voices called out. Her mother's shrill tone cut through the confusion, demanding someone find her daughter immediately. Beatrice burst through a service door and found herself in a kitchen area, chefs looking up in shock as a bride in full regalia stumbled past their prep stations. One dropped a ladle into a pot of soup. Another simply stared, mouth open. "Sorry," she gasped, not slowing down. "Really sorry." She pushed through another door and suddenly she was outside, the August heat hitting her like a wall after the air-conditioned interior. The country club sat on 20 acres of manicured grounds, but she needed to get further away than that. She needed to disappear before anyone convinced her this was just cold feet, just nerves, just something a glass of wine and a deep breath could fix. Her car was in the front lot, keys with her maid of honor, completely inaccessible. The guests' cars surrounded the main building. She ran toward the service road instead, where delivery trucks came and went. Her lungs burned. The corset of her dress made breathing difficult even on a good day, and this was decidedly not a good day. A black Range Rover sat idling near the service entrance, engine running. A man leaned against the driver's side, phone pressed to his ear, dressed in dark jeans and a casual button-down shirt. He looked up as she approached, his conversation apparently forgotten. Beatrice didn't think. Thinking was what had gotten her into this mess. "I need a ride," she said, breathless and desperate. "Please. I'll pay you whatever you want, I just need to leave, right now." The man straightened, taking in her appearance with dark eyes that revealed nothing. He was tall, at least 6'2", with broad shoulders and the kind of strong jawline that belonged in cologne advertisements. His black hair was slightly tousled, like he'd been running his hands through it. "Someone chasing you?" he asked, his voice deep and calm. "My entire family, probably my fiancé, definitely his family, and about 200 wedding guests." The words tumbled out. "Please, I know this is insane. I know I look insane, but I really, really need help." He studied her for a moment that felt like an eternity. Then he pushed off the vehicle and opened the passenger door. "Get in." She didn't need to be told twice. She gathered as much of her dress as physics would allow and climbed into the passenger seat, tulle and lace exploding everywhere like a fabric bomb had detonated. He closed the door behind her and walked around to the driver's side with long, unhurried strides. As he slid into the driver's seat, voices erupted from the direction she'd come. Her mother appeared first, still holding her champagne glass, face twisted in fury and confusion. Behind her, Marcus jogged in his tuxedo, looking more annoyed than heartbroken. "Drive," Beatrice said urgently. "Please just drive." The stranger shifted into gear and pulled away from the curb with smooth precision, not speeding exactly, but moving with enough purpose that they were out of the service area and onto the main road before anyone could reach them. Beatrice turned in her seat, watching through the rear window as her mother gestured wildly and Marcus pulled out his phone. "They're going to call the police," she said, reality settling over her shoulders like a heavy cloak. "They're going to think you kidnapped me. Did I?" he asked, glancing at her briefly before returning his attention to the road. "No, obviously not. I practically hijacked your car. That's what I'll tell them if they ask." He drove with easy confidence, taking a turn onto a county highway that led away from town. "Where are we going?" That was the question, wasn't it? Beatrice slumped back in her seat, the adrenaline beginning to fade, leaving exhaustion in its wake. "I have no idea. I didn't exactly plan this. That much is clear." There might have been amusement in his voice, but his expression remained neutral. "Do you have family nearby, friends?" "Everyone I know was at that wedding," she laughed, but it sounded hollow even to her own ears. "I don't even have my phone or my purse, or anything except this ridiculous dress." He was quiet for a moment, then took another turn, this time onto a smaller road that wound through farmland. "I'm Xander, by the way, Xander Donovan, Beatrice Sullivan." She paused. "Well, I guess I'm still Sullivan, almost wasn't." "What happened?" Xander asked. "If you don't mind me asking." Did she mind? She just asked a complete stranger to help her escape her own wedding. At this point, explanation seemed like the least she could offer. "I realized I was about to marry someone I didn't love," she said quietly. "I kept telling myself it would be fine, that love grows over time, that we were good partners on paper. His family and my family have been friends for years. He's a lawyer. I'm a paralegal at a different firm. It made sense to everyone, but making sense isn't the same as being right." Xander nodded slowly. "No, it's not. You probably think I should have figured that out before the actual wedding day." "I think you figured it out when you figured it out," he said. "Better today than a year into a marriage that makes you miserable." Something about his tone suggested he knew what he was talking about, but Beatrice didn't push. They drove in silence for a while, the landscape changing from manicured lawns to genuine countryside. Fields of corn stretched out on either side, and the afternoon sun hung heavy in a cloudless sky. "I need to call someone," Beatrice said eventually. "At least let my parents know I'm alive and safe. They don't deserve to worry, even if I am furious with them for pushing so hard for this wedding." Xander reached into the center console and pulled out his phone, unlocking it before handing it to her. "Use mine." She took it, fingers hovering over the screen. What was she even supposed to say? The thought of hearing her mother's voice, the accusations and demands that would inevitably follow, made her stomach turn. "Maybe a text," she said. "Just to tell them I'm okay." She typed out a message to her mother's number, keeping it brief and clear. She was safe, she was fine, she needed time to think, and she would be in touch soon. She didn't apologize. Surprisingly, that felt right. After sending the message, she set the phone in the cup holder between them. "Thank you for this, for helping me. Most people would have called me crazy and driven away." "Most people probably would have," Xander agreed. "But I've got some experience with situations that look one way from the outside and feel completely different from the inside." "That's cryptic." "It is," he acknowledged. "Sorry. Not trying to be mysterious, just saying I get it." They drove for another 30 minutes, small towns passing by the windows. Beatrice's dress had finally settled into something resembling order, though tulle still invaded most of the passenger side. Her veil had gotten tangled in the seatbelt, so she'd pulled it free and dumped it in the back seat, along with the combs that had been holding it in place. Her hair, which had been styled in an elaborate updo, was slowly collapsing. "I should probably have some kind of plan," she said, more to herself than to Xander. "I can't just drive around in a wedding dress forever." "You could," Xander said. "It would be memorable." Despite everything, Beatrice laughed. A real laugh this time, surprised out of her by the absurdity of it all. "I suppose it would." Xander glanced at her, and she caught the hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth. It transformed his face, making him seem less like a stoic rescuer and more like an actual person. "There's a town about 15 miles ahead," he said. "We could stop there, get you some normal clothes, something to eat, give you time to figure out your next move." "I don't have any money," Beatrice reminded him. "No wallet, no cards, nothing. I'll cover it." "You can't just pay for everything. You don't even know me." "No, but you seem like you're having a difficult day," Xander said. "Let me help." There was something in his voice, a sincerity that made her believe he genuinely wanted to help, not because he expected anything in return, but because it was the right thing to do. In her experience, people like that were rare. "Okay," she said softly. "Thank you." The town Xander mentioned turned out to be a small, picturesque place called Riverside. Population probably under 5,000. Main Street featured the usual collection of local businesses. A diner, a hardware store, a pharmacy, and a small clothing boutique that advertised both new and consignment items. Xander parked in front of the boutique. "Think they'll have something that fits?" "At this point, I'd wear a burlap sack," Beatrice said. She looked down at her dress, this beautiful, expensive thing that now felt like a costume. Though actually getting out of the car in this might cause a scene. "Wait here," Xander said. He climbed out and disappeared into the boutique, leaving Beatrice alone with her thoughts and an explosion of white fabric. She watched through the window as he spoke with someone inside, a middle-aged woman who kept glancing toward the Range Rover with obvious curiosity. Xander gestured, explained something, and the woman's expression shifted from confusion to understanding to what looked like sympathy. Minutes later, Xander returned with a shopping bag. "She's clearing out the back room for you. You can change there." I described your height and build, and she pulled a few options. "You're good at this," Beatrice observed, taking the bag. "Good at what?" "Problem solving, staying calm, helping runaway brides." "This is actually my first runaway bride," Xander admitted, "but I'll add it to my resume." The woman from the boutique, who introduced herself as Patricia, led Beatrice to a small back room filled with boxes and extra inventory. She didn't ask questions, just showed her where everything was and left her to it, which Beatrice appreciated more than she could express. Getting out of the wedding dress was its own adventure. The buttons running down the back were impossible to reach alone, and she struggled for a solid 10 minutes before swallowing her pride and asking Patricia for help. The older woman obliged without comment, her fingers quick and efficient with the tiny pearl buttons. "Thank you," Beatrice said quietly. "We've all had days where we needed to change course, honey," Patricia replied. "Yours is just more dramatic than most." When the dress finally fell away, Beatrice stood in just her strapless bra and the ridiculous shapewear her mother had insisted she needed. She kicked off the painful heels with relief and pulled on the clothes Xander had selected. Or rather, that Patricia had selected at Xander's request. The jeans fit well, a dark wash that was casual but not sloppy. The shirt was a simple cotton top in soft blue, with short sleeves and a flattering neckline. There were undergarments too, still with tags, which was thoughtful in a way that made Beatrice want to cry a little. She pulled on the canvas sneakers that completed the outfit and looked at herself in the small mirror Patricia had provided. She looked like a normal person. Just a woman in jeans and a comfortable shirt, her hair falling around her shoulders in waves now that she'd pulled out all the pins. No veil, no train, no visible price tag of family expectations. She looked like herself. Beatrice gathered up the wedding dress, handling it carefully despite everything. It wasn't the dress's fault that she'd made a mistake. She carried it out to the main area where Patricia waited. "Would you be able to keep this here?" Beatrice asked. Just for a little while, I'll arrange to have someone pick it up. I just can't take it with me right now." "Of course, dear." Patricia took the dress with reverence. "I'll hang it up properly, keep it safe." "Thank you, really." Xander was waiting by the register, and when Beatrice emerged fully changed, she saw his expression shift slightly. Surprise, maybe, or appreciation. It was hard to tell. "Better?" he asked. "So much better." She felt lighter already, despite the weight of everything she'd left behind. Xander paid for the clothes over Beatrice's protests, then led her next door to the diner. It was a classic small-town establishment, with red vinyl booths and a checkerboard floor, and the smell of coffee and pie that seemed to be universal to these places. They slid into a booth near the back, and a waitress appeared almost immediately with menus and water glasses. Beatrice realized she was starving. She'd been too nervous to eat breakfast, and the wedding brunch had been scheduled for after the ceremony. "Order whatever you want," Xander said, studying his own menu. Beatrice ordered a cheeseburger with fries and a chocolate milkshake, because it felt like the kind of meal that belonged to this version of herself, the one who'd chosen freedom over obligation. Xander ordered a club sandwich and coffee. While they waited, Beatrice's mind started working through the practicalities. "I need to figure out where to go," she said. "I can't go back home. Well, I can eventually, but not today. Maybe not for a few days. Do you have friends in other cities?" "My college roommate lives in Chicago. We're still close, but I haven't called her in a few weeks." Beatrice grimaced. "She's going to lose her mind when I tell her what happened." "Will she let you stay with her?" "Definitely. Lauren's always been there for me." Beatrice pulled Xander's phone toward her, then paused. "I keep using your phone and your money. I promise I'll pay you back for all of this. Don't worry about it." "I'm going to worry about it," Beatrice said firmly. "Just because I'm a mess right now doesn't mean I'm going to take advantage of your kindness." Something flickered in Xander's eyes. Respect, maybe. Fair enough. She called Lauren, who picked up on the third ring with her characteristic enthusiasm. "Hello, Lauren, it's Beatrice." "B. Why are you calling from a strange number? Shouldn't you be getting married right about now?" "About that," Beatrice said. "I kind of ran away from my wedding, and I'm wondering if I could crash with you for a few days while I figure things out." Silence. Then, "I'm sorry, what?" Beatrice explained the basics while Xander politely pretended not to listen, focusing on the salt and pepper shakers like they were fascinating artifacts. Lauren's responses progressed from shock to understanding to fierce support, which was exactly what Beatrice had needed to hear. "Get your butt to Chicago," Lauren said. "I'm working from home tomorrow anyway, so I'll be here. Do you need money for a bus ticket or something?" "I'm figuring that out," Beatrice said. "I'll text you when I know what time I'll arrive. Please tell me you're safe at least. You're not hitchhiking or anything insane like that." Beatrice glanced at Xander, who was now reading something on his phone with the kind of intense focus that suggested it was important. "I'm safe. I'll explain everything when I see you." After she hung up, their food arrived, and Beatrice discovered that everything tastes better when you've just completely upended your life. The burger was perfect, the fries were crispy and salty, and the milkshake was exactly the right amount of chocolate. Xander ate his sandwich with the same calm efficiency he seemed to apply to everything else. Beatrice studied him between bites, trying to figure out who he was beyond the obvious. He didn't seem like the kind of person who just happened to be hanging around country clubs in the middle of the afternoon. His clothes were casual but expensive, and the Range Rover was definitely not a budget vehicle. His watch was elegant and understated, the kind that cost more than most people's monthly rent but didn't advertise it. "Can I ask what you were doing at the country club?" Beatrice ventured. "When I found you, I mean." Xander set down his sandwich and took a drink of his coffee. I was supposed to be meeting someone for lunch, business associate. He called to cancel while I was sitting there, so I was about to leave when you appeared. Lucky timing. For you or for me. Both, maybe. Beatrice dragged a fry through ketchup. What kind of business are you in? Real estate development, Xander said. Commercial properties mostly. Office buildings, mixed-use developments, that sort of thing. That sounds complicated. It can be. But I like the challenge of taking an empty space and turning it into something useful, something that improves a community. There was passion in his voice when he talked about his work, subtle but unmistakable. Beatrice found herself curious about him in a way she hadn't been curious about anyone in a long time. Marcus had been an open book, his life and ambitions spelled out in neat bullet points. Xander seemed like more of a mystery. So you just drive around looking at properties? She asked. Sometimes. Today I was supposed to be discussing a potential project in the area, but like I said, that fell through. He paused. I'm not complaining about how the afternoon turned out instead. Was he flirting? Beatrice couldn't quite tell. Her flirting detection skills had atrophied during her relationship with Marcus, which had been more functional than romantic from almost the beginning. They finished eating, and Xander paid the bill despite Beatrice's half-hearted protests. She was keeping a mental tally of everything she owed him, determined to make it right once she had access to her bank account again. Back in the Range Rover, Beatrice pulled out Xander's phone to look up bus schedules to Chicago. The next bus didn't leave until tomorrow morning from a station about an hour away. I can take you, Xander said when she explained the situation. Take me where? To Chicago. I'll drive you. Beatrice stared at him. That's like a 4-hour drive. You can't just take a whole day to chauffeur me around. My schedule's flexible, Xander said, and honestly I don't have anything pressing. If you're comfortable with it, I'm offering. Why? The question came out more bluntly than she intended. Why are you being so nice to me? People don't just do things like this without wanting something in return. Xander was quiet for a moment, his hands resting on the steering wheel even though the engine wasn't running. When he spoke, his voice was careful, like he was choosing his words with precision. A few years ago I was engaged, he said. She was perfect on paper. Smart, beautiful, came from the right family, wanted the same things I wanted, or so I thought. 2 weeks before the wedding, she told me she'd been having an affair with someone else for 6 months. Said she tried to love me, but she just didn't. She was sorry, but she couldn't go through with it. I'm sorry, Beatrice said softly. I was angry at first, felt betrayed, humiliated. But after the anger faded, I realized she'd done the right thing. It hurt, but it would have hurt so much worse if she'd married me anyway and we'd both been miserable. He looked at Beatrice. You did the brave thing today, the right thing, and sometimes doing the right thing means you need help, so I'm helping. The honesty in his words settled something in Beatrice's chest. Okay, she said. Thank you, I'd appreciate the ride. They started driving north toward Chicago as the afternoon stretched into evening. Beatrice used Xander's phone to send her mother another text, providing a few more details and assuring her that she would be in touch soon. Her mother's response was predictably dramatic and demanding, but Beatrice ignored most of it. She sent a separate message to her father, who replied with unexpected understanding, and asked only that she stay safe. Marcus sent several texts that Beatrice read with growing detachment. He was angry, embarrassed, and apparently more concerned about what people would think than about whether Beatrice was okay. She realized she'd made the right choice with even more certainty than before. As they drove, Beatrice and Xander talked. About small things at first, favorite movies, books they'd read, places they'd traveled. Beatrice learned that Xander had grown up in Boston, went to college in California, and had built his business from the ground up over the past decade. He'd started with small residential properties and gradually expanded into larger commercial projects. "You enjoy it?" Beatrice asked. "Running your own company?" "Most days," Xander said. "It's challenging, sometimes stressful, but there's something satisfying about building something that's entirely yours, making decisions without having to run everything through committees and corporate hierarchies." "I've thought about doing something like that," Beatrice admitted. "Not real estate, but starting my own business. Maybe a consulting firm helping small companies with legal compliance. I'm good at the paralegal work, but I've always felt like I could do more." "Why haven't you?" "Fear, mostly. And Marcus always said it was too risky, that I should focus on building my career at an established firm first." She paused, which is funny because now I realize he just wanted me to stay in a predictable box. "You could still do it," Xander said. "Start your own thing. Might be the perfect time, actually. Clean slate and all that." The idea sent a small thrill through Beatrice. A clean slate, starting over, building the life she actually wanted instead of the one everyone expected her to have. They stopped for gas and coffee as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Beatrice stretched her legs in the parking lot, feeling the reality of the day settling over her. She'd actually done it. She'd run away from her wedding, left behind everything familiar, and now she was standing at a gas station somewhere in rural America with a stranger who'd shown her more kindness in 6 hours than her fiancé had shown her in 6 months. "You okay?" Xander asked, appearing beside her with 2 cups of coffee. "I think so," Beatrice said, accepting one of the cups. "It's starting to feel real, you know. This morning I was supposed to get married. Tonight I'm homeless and wearing borrowed clothes and drinking gas station coffee. And tomorrow? Tomorrow I start figuring out what comes next." She sipped the coffee. It was terrible, but it was warm and caffeinated, which was enough. "Thank you, Xander. Seriously. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't been there." "You would have figured something out," he said. "You seem resourceful." They got back on the road as darkness fell. The highway stretched out before them, illuminated by headlights and the occasional street lamp. Beatrice found herself growing tired, the adrenaline that had sustained her finally depleting. She fought to keep her eyes open, not wanting to be rude by falling asleep. "It's fine if you need to rest," Xander said, noticing her struggle. "We've still got about 90 minutes to go. Are you sure?" "I'm sure. Sleep." Beatrice adjusted her seat, finding a more comfortable position, and let her eyes close. The last thing she remembered was the steady hum of the engine and the feeling of being, inexplicably, safe. She woke up when the car stopped, blinking in confusion at the unfamiliar surroundings. They were parked on a residential street lined with brownstones, city lights glowing in every direction. "We're here," Xander said gently. "What's the address?" Beatrice gave him Lauren's address, and he pulled up in front of the correct building a few minutes later. The brownstone was beautiful, with flower boxes in the windows and a bright red door that Lauren had always loved. "This is me," Beatrice said, suddenly reluctant to leave. The day had been surreal, but Xander had been her anchor through all of it, and stepping out of his car felt like closing a chapter she wasn't quite ready to finish. "Wait," Xander said as she reached for the door handle. He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, then handed it to her. "Put your number in there. Once you get your phone back or get a new one, let me know you're settled. And seriously, if you need anything, call me." Beatrice entered her information, then added herself as a contact with just her first name. She handed the phone back, their fingers brushing in the exchange. "I will, and I'm going to pay you back for everything. The clothes, the food, all of it." "We'll figure it out," Xander said. "Take care of yourself, Beatrice." "You too." She climbed out of the Range Rover, closing the door softly behind her, and walked up the steps to Lauren's building. She buzzed the apartment and Lauren's voice came through immediately. "B, it's me." The door buzzed open and Beatrice glanced back at the Range Rover. Xander was still there, waiting to make sure she got inside safely. She waved and he waved back before finally pulling away from the curb. Lauren met her at the apartment door, pulling her into a fierce hug before Beatrice could even cross the threshold. "Holy shit, you actually did it. You actually ran away from your wedding." "I actually did," Beatrice confirmed, hugging her friend back. Lauren's apartment was exactly as Beatrice remembered. Cozy and cluttered with books, artwork on every wall, plants thriving on every available surface. It felt like coming home in a way her actual home never had. They stayed up late into the night, Beatrice recounting every detail of the day while Lauren listened with a mixture of horror and admiration. When Beatrice got to the part about Xander, Lauren's eyes lit up. "Wait, so this gorgeous stranger just helped you escape and then drove you 4 hours to Chicago without expecting anything in return? That's pretty much it, yeah. And you got his number." "He got mine," Beatrice corrected, "so I could let him know I was safe." "B, that's a meet cute straight out of a romance novel." "It's not like that," Beatrice protested, but even as she said it, she wasn't entirely sure she believed it. There had been something between them, some connection that felt significant even though they'd just met. "Whatever you say," Lauren said, clearly not convinced. "But if he texts you, you better tell me immediately." Over the next few days, Beatrice worked on putting her life back together. She called her parents, having several difficult but necessary conversations about why she'd made the choice she had. Her mother was hurt and angry, but her father seemed to understand, which helped. Marcus wanted to talk, but Beatrice refused. There was nothing to say that would change anything, and dragging it out would only make things worse. She arranged through a mutual friend to get her belongings from the apartment they'd been planning to share, grateful she'd never actually moved in. Lauren helped her get a new phone, and once it was activated, Beatrice sent a text to the number Xander had given her. "This is Beatrice. Got a new phone. I'm settled in Chicago and doing okay. Thank you again for everything." His response came an hour later. "Glad to hear it. How's the clean slate looking?" She found herself grinning at her phone like a teenager. They texted throughout the day, casual conversation that flowed easily. He told her about a property deal he was working on. She told him about her job search, the idea of starting her own consulting firm gaining traction in her mind. A week after the wedding that wasn't, Xander called her instead of texting. "Hey," he said when she answered. "I hope this isn't weird, but I'm going to be in Chicago tomorrow for a meeting. Would you want to get coffee or something? I'd like to see how you're doing." Beatrice's heart did something complicated in her chest. "I'd like that." They met at a cafe in downtown Chicago, a trendy place with exposed brick and artisanal pastries. Xander was waiting when she arrived, standing when he saw her approach. He looked good in a dark suit, professional and polished in a way that was somehow different from how he'd looked in jeans. "Hey," Beatrice said, suddenly nervous in a way she hadn't been when she'd been in a wedding dress covered in tulle. "Hey yourself." Xander's smile was warm and genuine. "You look good, rested." "I feel better," Beatrice admitted. "Everything's still complicated, but it's the right kind of complicated, you know." They ordered coffee and found a table near the window. Conversation came easily, like it had in the car, but there was an added layer now, an awareness that they were choosing to spend time together rather than being thrown together by circumstance. Xander told her about his meeting, a potential development project that would transform an old factory into mixed-use residential and commercial space. His eyes lit up when he talked about the plans, the vision he had for what the space could become. Beatrice told him about the informational interviews she'd been having with small business owners, researching what kind of legal consulting they needed most. The more she learned, the more convinced she became that she could build something real. "I think you should do it," Xander said. "Start your firm. You clearly have the knowledge and the passion for it." "It's scary, though," Beatrice admitted. "Starting something from nothing." "It is," Xander agreed, "but the best things usually are." When they finished their coffee, Xander walked her to the train station, neither of them in a hurry to end the conversation. At the entrance, he paused. "Can I see you again?" he asked. "Not because you owe me anything or because I helped you that day, but because I really enjoy talking to you and I'd like to get to know you better." Beatrice felt warmth spread through her chest. "I'd like that too. Next week, I could come back to Chicago or you could come out to Boston if you want. I'd show you around." "Boston sounds good," Beatrice said. "I've never been." Over the following weeks, they fell into a pattern. Xander came to Chicago when he could, and Beatrice visited Boston twice. They explored the city together, Xander showing her his favorite restaurants and the projects he'd worked on, proud of what he'd built. With each visit, Beatrice found herself growing more comfortable around him, more herself. He made her laugh with dry observations about the people around them. He listened when she talked about her plans for her business, offering advice without being condescending. He was supportive without being overbearing, interested without being demanding. 2 months after they met, Beatrice officially launched Sullivan Legal Consulting. It was small, just her working from Lauren's apartment at first, but she had 3 clients already and interest from several more. Xander sent her a massive flower arrangement to celebrate, with a card that read simply, "To new beginnings." They made their relationship official shortly after that, though Beatrice wasn't sure exactly when they'd gone from friends to something more. It had been gradual, natural, like water finding its level. One evening in Boston, Xander had kissed her goodnight after walking her to her hotel, and it had felt like the most natural thing in the world. "Is this okay?" he'd asked, his forehead resting against hers. "Very okay," she'd whispered back. Beatrice's family struggled with the speed of things at first, particularly her mother, who kept insisting it was too soon after the Marcus situation. But when they met Xander at a family dinner 3 months in, even her mother had to admit he was different. He was respectful but not obsequious, charming without being fake, and the way he looked at Beatrice made it clear he saw her as a partner, not a project. "He's good for you," her father told her privately. "You smile more now than I've seen you smile in years." As fall turned to winter, Beatrice and Xander navigated the challenges of a relationship that spanned 2 cities. It wasn't always easy. They both had demanding careers, schedules that didn't always align, and the simple logistics of being 4 hours apart. But they made it work through constant communication, regular visits, and a shared commitment to building something real. Xander surprised her by showing up at her door one snowy December evening, unannounced. Beatrice answered the door to find him standing there with snowflakes in his hair and an expression that was both nervous and determined. "What are you doing here?" she asked, delighted. "I thought you had meetings all week." "I rescheduled them," Xander said. "Can I come in?" "Of course." Inside, he brushed the snow from his coat and turned to face her. "I've been thinking about something for a while now, and I need to talk to you about it." Beatrice's heart started to race. "Okay. This long-distance thing, it's not working for me anymore," Xander said, and Beatrice felt her stomach drop until he continued. "Not because I don't want to be with you, but because I want to be with you more. All the time, not just weekends and phone calls." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want you to move to Boston, Or I'll move to Chicago. I don't care which, as long as we're in the same city." He stepped closer. "I'm in love with you, Beatrice. I think I have been since you hijacked my car in that ridiculous wedding dress. And I don't want to spend any more time apart than we have to." Tears pricked at Beatrice's eyes, but they were happy tears this time. "I love you too, I have for a while." "Yeah, yeah." She closed the distance between them, kissing him with everything she felt. When they finally broke apart, she was breathless and grinning. "I'll move to Boston. My business is still small enough that I can relocate it, and honestly, it might be easier to grow it there anyway. More companies, more potential clients. Are you sure?" "I don't want you to give up what you've built." "I'm not giving it up. I'm expanding it." She took his hands in hers. "Besides, you're not exactly asking me to sacrifice my career. You're asking me to build a life with you, and that's what I want too." Xander pulled her close again, and Beatrice felt the rightness of it settle into her bones. This was nothing like her relationship with Marcus had been. This was passion and partnership, challenge and comfort, everything she hadn't known she needed until she'd found it. The move to Boston happened gradually over the next 2 months. Beatrice found office space for her consulting firm in a building that Xander happened to own, though he offered her a rate so reasonable she suspected he was taking a loss on it. She didn't move into his place immediately, wanting to maintain some independence, but she spent more nights there than not. Boston suited her in ways she hadn't expected. The city had energy and history, and her business grew faster than it had in Chicago. She hired an assistant after 6 months, then a junior consultant after 8. Xander was always supportive, offering advice when she asked but never pushing, respecting the boundary between their personal and professional lives. A year after she'd run away from her wedding, Beatrice sat in Xander's living room, her laptop balanced on her knees as she reviewed contracts for a new client. Xander was in his study working on his own projects, but the door was open, and she could hear him talking on the phone, his voice carrying that note of focused intensity he got when he was negotiating. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lauren. "How's the big, scary new life going?" Beatrice looked around the apartment that had become her home, at the life she'd built, the career she'd created, the man in the other room who loved her for exactly who she was. "It's perfect," she texted back. "It's exactly right." When Xander finished his call, he came to find her, dropping onto the couch beside her and pulling her feet into his lap. "How's work?" "Good. Closed another client today, which means we're officially at capacity. I'm going to need to hire someone else." "That's amazing, Beatrice." His pride was evident in his voice. "I'm so proud of you." "I'm pretty proud of me too," she admitted, "though I still can't believe this is my life sometimes." "What do you mean?" "Just that a year ago I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life. And now I'm sitting here with you, running a successful business, living in a city I love. It's like I'm living someone else's life, except it's actually mine." Xander was quiet for a moment, his thumb tracing circles on her ankle. "Can I tell you something? Always. That day when you asked me for help, I almost said no. I had a phone call I needed to make, a meeting to reschedule, a dozen things running through my head. But something made me look at you, really look, and I saw someone who was brave enough to walk away from the wrong thing even when it was terrifying. That kind of courage is rare, and I wanted to help preserve it." "I didn't feel brave," Beatrice said softly. "I felt like I was falling apart." "Sometimes those are the same thing." He pulled her closer, and she set her laptop aside to curl into his side. "I'm glad you got into my car that day." "Me too." They sat like that for a while, comfortable in the silence. Eventually, Xander spoke again. "I want to ask you something, and I need you to know there's no pressure. We can take as much time as you need." Beatrice's pulse quickened, but it was anticipation, not fear. "Okay. Will you marry me?" She pulled back to look at him, finding his dark eyes serious but warm. "Are you actually proposing right now?" "Not officially. Not until I have a ring and a better plan than blurting it out on a random Tuesday night, but I wanted to know if it's something you'd want. Eventually. I know marriage might be complicated for you after everything that happened, and I don't want to rush you or push you into anything." Beatrice cupped his face in her hands. "Yes," she said firmly. "When you actually ask me, whenever that is, the answer is yes. Because you're nothing like Marcus, and what we have is nothing like what I had with him. This is real, and I want all of it. Everything we can build together." The relief and joy on Xander's face was worth every difficult moment she'd endured to get here. He kissed her thoroughly, and when they broke apart, both of them were laughing. "I'm going to do it right," he promised. "The proposal, something meaningful, not just me blurting it out on the couch." "I would have said yes to the couch proposal," Beatrice told him. "But I'm not going to complain about you putting in effort." True to his word, Xander planned an elaborate proposal 2 months later. He took her to the country club where they'd met, which she had to admit was both romantic and hilarious. He'd arranged a private dinner on the terrace overlooking the grounds, and as the sun set, he got down on one knee with a ring that was exactly her style. Elegant and simple, nothing flashy or presumptuous. "Beatrice Sullivan," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "You literally ran into my life when you needed help, and somehow you ended up saving me instead. You're brilliant and brave, and you make me laugh every single day. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Beatrice said, tears streaming down her face. "Absolutely yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger and she pulled him up for a kiss, not caring that there were other diners on the terrace watching and applauding. This was her moment, her choice, her future, and it was perfect. They married 8 months later in a small ceremony in Boston. No cathedral, no 200 guests, no elaborate production. Just their closest friends and family in a beautiful garden, promising to love and support each other through whatever came next. Lauren was her maid of honor, naturally, and spent the entire morning reminding Beatrice that she'd called it when she said Xander was a meet-cute from a romance novel. "You literally ran away from one wedding and right into your actual soulmate," Lauren said as she helped Beatrice into her dress, a simple ivory gown that was nothing like the elaborate confection she'd worn before. "That's the most dramatic love story I've ever witnessed in real life." "It does sound kind of unbelievable when you put it that way," Beatrice admitted. "But you're happy." "I'm so happy I could burst." Walking down the aisle to Xander, Beatrice felt none of the doubt and fear that had plagued her before. There was only certainty, joy, and the overwhelming rightness of choosing this man, this life, this future. Xander's vows made her cry beautiful words about courage and new beginnings, and building something together that was better than anything either of them could create alone. Her own vows focused on trust and partnership, on the way he'd helped her find herself again when she'd been lost. When they were pronounced husband and wife, the kiss was met with cheers and applause, and Beatrice thought about how far she'd come from that desperate woman in a wedding dress asking a stranger for help. "I love you," she whispered against Xander's lips. "I love you too," he whispered back. "Thank you for hijacking my car," she laughed, pulling him close again. "Best decision I ever made." The reception was intimate and joyful, full of laughter and good food and people who genuinely cared about them. Beatrice's parents were there, her mother finally having made peace with the fact that Beatrice's life hadn't gone according to plan but had turned out better for it. Marcus was, unsurprisingly, not invited, and Beatrice didn't think about him even once. During their first dance, Xander held her close and asked, "Any regrets?" "Not a single one," Beatrice said honestly. Just that I didn't drive by that country club 5 years earlier. We might not have been ready for each other 5 years earlier. Maybe the timing was exactly right." "Maybe it was," Xander agreed, spinning her gently. "Here's to perfect timing and runaway brides, and to strangers who stopped to help when they could have driven away." Life after the wedding was busy and full. Beatrice's consulting firm continued to grow, eventually requiring her to move into larger office space and hire a full team. Xander's development company landed several major projects, including one that transformed an entire neighborhood and won awards for sustainable urban design. They traveled together when they could, exploring new cities and countries. They bought a house with a garden where they could host dinners for friends and family. They adopted a dog, a rescue mutt who had the same kind of scrappy determination that Beatrice recognized in herself. 2 years into their marriage, they started talking about children. Not because anyone was pressuring them, not because it was what people expected, but because they both wanted to build a family together. It took time and some difficulty, including one heartbreaking miscarriage that brought them even closer as they supported each other through the grief. But eventually, Beatrice got pregnant, and they welcomed a daughter into the world on a spring morning that felt like pure magic. They named her Grace, because grace was what had brought them together, the grace to make hard choices and the grace to accept help when it was offered. When Grace was old enough to ask about how her parents met, Beatrice told her the story honestly. About how sometimes the scariest decisions lead to the best outcomes, about how sometimes strangers become the most important people in your life, about how love isn't always neat and predictable, but it's always worth fighting for. "So you ran away from a wedding?" Grace asked, her eyes wide. "In a big white dress, I did," Beatrice confirmed, "because I knew it wasn't right and I had to be brave enough to admit that." "And then you met Dad." "And then I met Dad," Beatrice agreed. "And he helped me when I really needed it, and we became friends, and then we fell in love." Grace considered this seriously. "That's a good story." "It's my favorite story," Beatrice said, pulling her daughter close, "because it's true and because it gave me everything I have now." That evening, after Grace was asleep, Beatrice and Xander sat on their back porch, watching the sun set over the garden they'd planted together. It had been 5 years since that chaotic afternoon when she'd run away from her wedding, and sometimes it felt like a lifetime ago, and sometimes it felt like yesterday. "You ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't been there that day?" Xander asked, reading her thoughts like he so often did. "Sometimes," Beatrice admitted. "I would have figured something out, called a cab, found a bus, made it work somehow, but I'm glad I didn't have to. I'm glad it was you." "Me too." He took her hand, his thumb brushing over her wedding ring. "Though I have to admit, when you came running at me in that dress, I thought you might be crazy. I was a little crazy that day. The good kind of crazy, the kind that changes everything." Beatrice leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady presence that had become her home. "I read something recently," she said, "about how the best love stories aren't about finding someone perfect, but about finding someone who's perfect for you. Someone who sees you at your worst and loves you anyway. Someone who helps you become who you were always meant to be." "Sounds about right," Xander said softly. "That's us," Beatrice continued. "You saw me at possibly the worst moment of my life, running away from everything I'd ever known, and you didn't judge. You just helped. And then you kept helping, kept showing up, kept choosing me even when I was a mess." "You were never a mess," Xander corrected gently. "You were someone finding her courage, and it was the easiest thing in the world to choose you, Beatrice. It still is." They sat in comfortable silence as the last light faded from the sky. Inside the house, their daughter slept peacefully. Around them, the life they'd built together stood as testament to the power of taking chances, of being brave enough to walk away from the wrong thing so you can find the right thing. "I love you," Beatrice said quietly. "I love you too," Xander replied. "Thank you for getting into my car that day. Thank you for opening the door." Years later, when people asked Beatrice about her wedding, she always smiled and told them she'd actually had two. The first one taught her what she didn't want. The second one gave her everything she did. And it all started with a desperate sprint through a country club, a stranger who stopped to help, and the courage to choose the unknown over the safe but wrong. It was, she often reflected, the most terrifying and best decision she'd ever made. Running away had led her straight to where she was always meant to be, into the arms of a man who saw her strength even when she felt weak, who supported her dreams while building his own, who made her laugh and held her when she cried and chose her every single day. The life Beatrice built with Xander wasn't the one she'd planned all those years ago, standing in that powder room staring at her reflection and realizing she was about to make a terrible mistake. It was better. It was real. It was hers. And it all started because she was brave enough to run. And because a billionaire in a black Range Rover decided to help a runaway bride find her way home.